Good. Benefit. Welcome back to AI Insiders with AI Marketers Guild. Um, Pete, I'll let you introduce yourself in a sec, but this has just been such a treat in getting to catch up with him recently because we've got this journalist perspective of how the whole media landscape is shifting, and so as soon as I started reading the Media Copilot and diving deeper into this, I was like these are perspectives that would just be so valuable here. So yeah, Pete, if you want to introduce yourself, then we'll just start diving in. I know I've got some great slides to start things off with, but I'll just remind everyone in case a few of you haven't been here before, these are community conversations. These are not webinars, so feel free to chime in on camera or off in chat or live, and just be great to have a lot of these as just springboards for further conversation.
Sweet. Thanks, David. Hey, everybody. I'm Pete. I am the editor-in-chief and CEO and founder and chief garbage taker outer for the Media Copilot, which is my company. And we publish a newsletter. We also teach how to use AI tools to media professionals and creative teams, and do some AI consulting for media and content operations. When I say we, it's me and some freelancers and fractional help, but it's doing fine because there's a lot of demand for those things right now. But it was really nice to hear the discussion about CES. Actually, I went to that show and covered it for various publications for like 20 years. It was really cool to see the show evolve. There was actually a period that people might not remember, like 10 or 12 years ago, when people were doubting the relevance of CES with the rise of mobile and stuff. But I know those guys down at CTA, and they did a great job of sort of making sure it stays relevant by reaching out to some of the industries you guys are just talking about, like cars in particular. It was a kind of a car show for a long time, and still is pretty good at temperature take on the industry. Um,
Yeah, and I mean, it's still a funny thing because yeah, Apple and Apple and Google might and Microsoft, all these power players might not use CES to go and like further their own cause any, and they might have like no official presence there or a really minimal one. But then when you have companies like Nvidia, yeah, that
hmm.
are showcasing what they're doing, then it's like it's still relevant from the launch side with just a very different set of companies, and it's like there's everything beyond the launches that happens. So
Yeah, it's wild to see NVIDIA in particular because again, covering CES for so long, NVIDIA was always there and they always had some event, usually off campus even. It would be like at the Palms or something, then they have sort of a keynote on the first press day. And it was always sort of this niche thing for like the nerds. You gotta go and see, check out what they're doing with gaming and GPUs, but it ended up being this strangely, I mean, prescient long-term play, I guess, in terms of for the show. Like it's great, obviously, that they're there and haven't like they obviously do their own events too, but keeping that CES keynote was uh obviously very relevant to keeping CES relevant for the past couple of years. Um, but anyway, we could go on and on about CES, its relevance, and all the gadgets and AI powered or otherwise. But I wanted to chat with you guys today a little bit. I've got some slides, not too many, don't worry. There's only like 6 or 7 about a concept that's on the minds of like pretty much everyone in media, which is AI, but specifically like what AI search means for news, right? Because AI, certainly we all know you go to an AI bot and you get information. And for the longest time, it was this novel thing that you could ask it anything, like what are the causes of the French Revolution? And it would come back to you with all this information that it would pull out of its knowledge base. It's absorbed the entire internet. It's just going to show you some facts about whatever you asked it about. And then over time, as people sort of realized it's not always correct, uh, and the industry has obviously kicked into overdrive and building AI into everything. That's evolved to what can AI tell me about the world? And so the rise of perplexity is obviously like the biggest thing in this space in terms of AI search. And that's applying AI, obviously, to what's on the internet now, search results. It's like, okay, you get a set of search results, and AI can sort of summarize not just the links, but like what's in the links and give you a decent shot at your correct answer right away. Now, this obviously has huge implications for media, particularly the news media, since they are in the business of, giving you current information. Um, and the one of the big implications being obviously that you don't get a lot of search traffic from an AI summary. So, it sort of disrupts the grand bargain that Google and others sort of established in the early days of the internet that, oh, you're going to index my content. Great. As long as I get referral traffic from that, it's all good. This
Mhm.
obviously makes that a more one-sided deal. So that's sort of the background to this. I wrote about it a little bit earlier this week, and I whipped up some slides based on my uh, the newsletter I wrote, and I'll just start sharing my screen if that's all right.
Yeah, please.
All right. Y'all seeing that?
Search apocalypse.
There we go. I love those AI images. Here's me. Here's a quick thing about me. I already sort of went into this. I've been a journalist for 25 plus years covering tech, built a lot of operations, et cetera, et cetera. And that's a little bit on Media Copilot, a lot of subscribers. Please subscribe. Okay. So we're kind of at this tipping point with search. So there's an interesting statistic in a recent report from the Reuters Institute on Journalism that shows search traffic in aggregate has actually been relatively stable, despite a lot of complaints from publishers that it's going down. That's not to say those publishers are lying. There's obviously just some increases happening in other parts of the system that are offsetting it. The data is from Chartbeat. It's not super granular, so I'm not sure what the pluses and the minuses are in there, but it is one of these counterintuitive observations. Oh, that's weird. Why is search traffic stable? So you might almost think like, well, maybe AI search isn't this threat that it's supposed to be. And I would say, I would caution saying that, okay, well, even though it is, it's kind of, poised to go off a cliff as AI search proliferates. Because until now, we have seen AI search engines like Perplexity. We've seen AI search like in ChatGPT search. Google has AI overviews, but those so far have only been in about, it depends on what study you look at, but between 4% and say 20% of searches have an AI overview. 20% is like the peak. Like when they first released it and had it everywhere, it was probably around there. Excuse me. It seems like they've dialed it back somewhat at this point. Um, so what is this going to mean for news? Well, so far, Google has not applied AI overviews to news content. So if you ask about something current, it's going to kick you to Google News, or just tell you to check sources if you're actually asking Gemini directly. Um, so that has just changed though, based on CES, if you can believe it. So Google has essentially launched their very first news summarization product at CES. So there's their platform for Google TV. It does a lot of cool things. The new update will actually summarize news for you. Again, it's a sort of a prototype feature, so it's like sources. We're not quite sure exactly how it's getting the news, but I'm sure they're figuring that out. And but it is the first time they've actually announced a product that's like specifically aimed at current news. That's generative. That's an AI summary. So that portends that this is something obviously they want to move into. There's a lot of complications with that. We can go into them based on where you want to what you want to discuss because of it's kind of a copyright law minefield to wander into that, as we've seen with media companies suing Perplexity and OpenAI and others. But they clearly want to sort of move this way. It's just because they have this established model and established platform that works pretty well for them. They have to move slowly. Another data point to point at is that Google's market share has actually dipped below 90%, according to StatCounter, for 3 months in a row. That hasn't happened since 2015. And it suggests this is more than a blip, that essentially that the now distant footsteps behind Google, certainly, like Perplexity is tiny market share, same with ChatGPT search, but um, that idea of AI search is just starting to sort of nip at their heels a bit, and there's probably feeling a little bit more urgency than you would
And
commonly think. Yeah.
just, do you know like how this is being defined? Because it's like for instance, like most of my chat GPT behavior is not search, but like is some of this just like lumped in, or how do you even define what the pie is right now?
Yeah, it's a really good question because you can divide search into like is AI um technically search, like and within an AI, you can explicitly press the search button within ChatGPT, and it clearly is. But if you think about it this way, if you go to ChatGPT for information you would have Googled, a couple of years ago,
Mm,
um, that's obviously sort of obfuscating some of their market, right? Like it's like, oh, I'm just sort of getting the summary. So counting all ChatGPT activity as search is incorrect, but
right.
it's probably more than everyone who hits the search button. Now that said, ChatGPT's private company. They're gonna not, they don't release a lot of stats. Google doesn't even release a lot of stats. I've asked them directly several times, like what percentage of searches include an AI overview, and they have not been clear on that. You just a lot of third parties have just had to figure that out. So yeah, defining search and who's competing with who is getting a little more difficult, but it's clear that in the whole idea of how people get their information, the number of people whose first stop is now AI, while low, can only increase. There is a lot of potential for that market, and you can see this in sort of like a lot of the funding rounds with Perplexity and just a lot of the buzz online around early adopters, essentially changing their default browser, or sorry, their default search engine in the browser to
Mm,
to one of these AI things. Again, that's early adopter behavior. I think that's probably a ways away before it goes mainstream. But when you have brands like Apple putting it on their phones, and then people sort of just get more used to this idea of asking for an answer in a customized way, there's a I think there will be a tipping point at some point. Like, how they say everything happens gradually until it happens all at once, right?
yeah.
I think we're going to hit that all at once point. Don't know when, could be this year, but something is going to give uh sooner than later. It's probably not a decade away, I'll tell you that.
Mhm.
Excuse me. All right, moving on. So there's sort of an existential. Oh, this was working much better with Spotlight. Okay, I spoiled it already. So there's the question for AI publishers. Okay, like if you want to have your content seen in for this very forward-looking AI audience, like you kind of wonder how are you going to get into AI search? Like how do you get in those summaries, right? So when people ask me this, I always sort of ask, well, there's a better question, like why would you want to? And I don't mean to be dismissive of the idea. I think it is a worthy goal, but the key thing to understand, it is very different from SEO. The incentives alone. Like if you're an AI search, like I mentioned, it's great to be summarized, flattering even, but it is not going to get you the referral traffic you got in the previous generation or the current generation, I guess. Um, so in other words, AI search brings with it a whole new set of incentives. So, um, to answer the question, why would you want to? Like, well, number one, like there's obviously a big branding opportunity if you're appearing in AI summaries and you are the definitive result or cited as one of them in sort of either this strip on Perplexity or in ChatGPT, GPT, its sort of list of sites. or in Google AI overviews, one of the things that's actually linked, um, there's a lot of authority inherent to having that, and that certainly has value,
Mhm.
just not in the same way that referral traffic would have rewarded you with. Um, there's clearly an opportunity for licensing revenue if you're big enough, that is. But even if you're not big enough, and I'm happy to sort of go into that because there is a very nascent but interesting and growing league of, I call it almost like the league of AI non-aligned startups. There's got to be a better name for it, but it is a bunch of startups like Tollbit. There's other ones named Dapier and a bunch of others who are trying to essentially build an economy around this idea of like, oh, okay, so you want to scrape and summarize content. If you are an AI engine, you need to pay a toll for that content in order to do that. Or you won't be able to access it at all, which is, kind of the nuclear option in a lot of this discovery. But again, it might be, you might want to think about it um, because you can separate out AI crawlers from search crawlers. And again, if you're not getting either the brand recognition or some of the other benefits outlined here on from being crawled by AI. Again, why would you want to? Um, there is some referral traffic, to be clear, on AI engines, particularly Perplexity, which prominently puts links. And according to Google, the people that do click through from a summary, even though they're fewer in number than those that click through from a search, are better. What does that mean? Well, they're more engaged. They're more inclined to really go to your brand, spend more time, possibly, convert whatever that means for you. Um, so that alone might be a good reason to be in these summaries rather than not. Uh, Data is not clear whether the ROI is well enough, and it sort of depends a lot on the frequency of the searches you're peering in. But it is there. And so, obviously, the clear takeaway is having some clear goals and business strategy attached to your AI search strategy, and otherwise, you might better be better off protecting yourself. And so, some ways to sort of get into these searches, or even think about it, like these are the primary takeaways on this new mindset around AI search. Number one, it's not the same game as social and search, which is kind of thank God in a lot of ways. So like AI in its early days, but it tends to reward substantive content, unique content, thoughtful content, more comprehensive content. And back in the day, we used to call that good journalism. I think the incentives of journalism have gotten a little bit skewed from the scale era, from the social search era. There was a lot of content that was designed to provoke or quick hits. I mean, you've seen all the bad stuff that's out there, and AI brings an opportunity to disincentivize those undesirables from, say, that era of content, and hopefully steer us toward better journalism overall, and just better content overall. Whatever you do, it's got to be kind of like a 360-degree strategy, for lack of a better term. In other words, like the business concerns around being in AI search are very relevant. There's got to be some kind of licensing strategy around your content. We're actually seeing this more and more. There was a report last year from Wired that if you know Common Crawl, which is one of these massive data sets that these AI companies harvest, it had not until the last couple of years ever gotten a request to have information removed from Common Crawl. And now publishers are tripping over themselves to get out of Common Crawl because they realize, oh, our content's in there and that's our IP. And now we have opportunities to license. And if we don't, well, I've just outlined what happens when you don't. So the whole content strategy needs to be paired with, obviously, with the business strategy.
Mhm.
Um, just a reality, AI summaries, there's going to be less real estate. There's only going to be so many people summarized. It's going to be fewer than in a Google search. And, there's going to be more of a death match, I guess, to find who gets summarized, particularly on these big queries. So it's something to adapt to. And there is an interesting aspect to how this is evolving right now in this sort of nascent area of AI, which is that what you're seeing is these deals between big publishers and OpenAI in particular, but certainly other AI platform holders like Microsoft, like Meta, are starting to sign deals too. But it's always the same folks, right? It's always like Reuters, it's always like News Corp, et cetera. And this is kind of an issue. This is going to rapidly become an issue where you kind of get this sameness around all these AI engines summarizing various things, and others like Perplexity that go beyond that set. Not that ChatGPT doesn't, but it's a subtle thing. Um, if you don't go beyond that set, there's just going to be this sort of sameness to it, right? Now, with the sort of League of Non-Aligned Worlds of startups that could start to uh, introduce a little more variety to these sort of AI results. But so far, none of them are big enough to get on the radar. Really, it's just the beginning of this. And, from what I can understand, maybe it was just the holidays, but it seems like OpenAI is kind of satisfied, like they're kind of in a good place, and there's been a slowdown in terms of the deals they've been signing.
Well, and Pete, yeah, a couple of questions.
Yeah, go.
One with like, as we get into this new era of SEO, like you mentioned, a big source is like the direct deals. But I mean, another thing I've seen quite a bit is when I do an AI search and then I do something comparable in Google, that like, if I'm looking for like local recommendation somewhere, like Time Out, for instance, like it does really well in both, right? Like it's a site that maybe it's not a top 10 property, but it's really well SEO optimized. And so the AI engines are taking a cue. Have you seen like how much kind of similarity there is between like great SEO and AI positioning?
Yeah, it's a really good question. Like, because there's obviously a lot of overlap,
Mhm.
being comprehensive, being clear about what your article's about, et cetera. All of those things are that work for SEO. At least some of those things that work for SEO will certainly work for like SEO for chat. Honestly, there's a debate on what this is even called. Like I've heard AIEO, GAIEO, et cetera. It's like
Yeah,
there's a whole, uh farm what's the song E-I-E-I-O, the
yeah,
farm old McDonald, that's it. It feels like that again. So that whole idea of like if you have good SEO, do you have good AI SEO? um I think it's a step. I don't think it's necessarily the quite there. And like I'm not an SEO expert to be clear, although I've worked with many of them. And there is some aspect to AI that I would honestly just call definitiveness that I think is a mixture of the information you put up and what the kind of internet consensus is. Because again, it's AI isn't looking for keywords. It's not looking for at least not in the same way. It's looking for underlying patterns, right? And so it's not just is this thing uh have all the tick all the boxes on this topic. It's like, does it align with the things that I've already seen in that are similar,
Mm.
which is not quite the same thing. Um, how that manifests, I'm not sure. And I know there's a ton of people studying this right now. Someone's going to come out with some definitive guide to it that may or may not work. Um, but also there's an aspect to the customization of these searches, like, there's if you look in Google Search Console or what have you, there's a lot of different well-known ways to find out like what people are searching and what is the biggest opportunities with keywords. With AI, I feel like that gets split even further because, the phrasing, the topics people are asking about, um, it just gets basically first for starters, the queries are longer. right?
Mhm.
And they're more, you're actually sort of having a conversation with this thing. And sometimes you really are having a conversation with this thing as it's giving you information. So it's much harder to boil it down to, oh, here's a few words or this is the topic. It's really more like, again, what's the pattern and what are the patterns within those patterns, I guess, that the content that you've produced tends to answer to. Um, it's more complicated. I feel like it's almost a thing that maybe only AI could understand in
Mm.
terms of how to optimize content for that. But it does feel like it's a different animal. And then you, again, like I say, you layer on these business realities that
Mm.
you have to be of a certain size to even sign a deal with OpenAI currently.
Yeah.
I think that that'll rapidly, maybe not rapidly, but that'll go away eventually. I am optimistic that some of these startups will, some of their these marketplaces will take hold. And then, people basically you'll be able to go to a marketplace like Tollbit and say, like, here's my content, here's the price I'm setting for it. And
Mm.
then AI engines can go to that marketplace and, whoever runs it, whether it's OpenAI or Mistral or whoever, can decide, oh, is this worth indexing for at this price? Um, and hopefully that becomes something real, scalable, and it starts to become just a way people can frankly, make money on their content going forward because it's probably not going to be referral traffic.
Well,
Um,
and I want to ask one question about that, and then I want to get to some that are starting to bubble up in the chat. And
yeah.
and so for it's like if you're Reuters, the New York Times, right? Like you have all kinds of revenue streams. You have you've got a leg up on a lot of others. If it, look a lot of independent content creators, and the example, I'm sorry for those who hear me repeat myself on these calls, but like I use AI a lot for cooking, and I can't help but think of all the independent publishers I disintermediate because, well, they do have a pretty shitty user experience, and I'm bombarded with ads on their sites and everything. But also, it's so much easier for me to have a conversation with AI and say, I like this ingredient, I don't like that. I want to double the recipe. I want to make this thing healthier. I want to do that, and I get exactly what I want. And I've never had a bad recipe. Maybe there's a better one out there, but like some have been great, and it's always worked. And so like for all the, but I also fear, even from an ethical perspective, me doing this is actually hurting all these independent publishers. Like, are they toast in this new era? Like, what happens to all these ad-supported sites that are dependent so heavily on this search referral traffic?
Well, definitely degraded. We're already starting to see that in terms of like the evergreen. Well, see, the thing is, like, search trends are a little different from AI trends, and we're obviously seeing the affiliate world. Google, as everyone knows, I think, recently hammered those sites that were sort of using domain abuse, I guess they called it, because they were extending their domain to certain areas that maybe didn't seem make sense. But at the same time, that use case that you're talking about, like, just summarize this thing for me, which is um, really great for users because it's solving that whole jump to recipe problem that, the incentives of SEO created, is a thing. Like, I similarly, I use it as well in that way. And again, I think if you don't have some kind of AI strategy attached to what you're doing, um, I think you will be toast. Now, the big one I would point to here that would suggest even if you do, you still might be, is this third thing, the less real estate, because that's just what's going to happen, I think, with some of these queries. Some piece of content is going to end up being like essentially winning the SEO for chatbots war, or a few of them will, and it will be tough for the rest to stand out if they're not part of that, literal conversation with the AI. So yes, I think if your AI game isn't good, you will probably be toast because you just will get sidelined by everyone else that's getting in these summaries. The If there is a ray of hope for those folks, it is like, do you have some other method to reach audience that is outside of this that is not shrinking, you know, whatever that may be. I'd actually ask you guys, like, what isn't shrinking these days? What are you guys seeing in terms of like if you were a very AI averse brand that you want to essentially block the crawlers because you don't see the ROI, what would you be doing in terms of growth? Like, I know what I'd be doing, with a lot of traditional stuff around newsletters and just doubling down and using AI to enhance my marketing game and all these other channels, um, and just focus on the ones that I think aren't gonna, get banned by the U.S. government, I guess.
Yeah.
Uh,
Um, yeah, we've got some hands raised.
sure.
Kate, please.
Okay, but before I talk, Adam, it looked like you really wanted to jump in. Did you want to take it?
No, you raised your hand before me, and
Okay.
as the oldest of three, I get accused of stealing the
I I
spotlight far too
I almost
often.
called on Adam first too, and I saw
I saw
the
his
hands.
no,
Yes,
okay. Well,
yes.
I'm the oldest child too, Adam, so I'll take
Okay.
it. And sorry guys, I'm not on camera today, but I just wanted to dig in a little bit on the recommendations for that you're giving for adapting the content to
Yeah.
make it more bot friendly. Because it's a little bit of like a, I don't know, a space that no one I've talked to seems to have a real answer for. And like, you can go into your log in the back end of your website and see the bots that are crawling your website. They leave a stamp, right? So you can see Perplexity's here, OpenAI is here, they're seeing my content. But the question around how do I engineer my content to be picked up by the bots is still a little bit like of a gray space that I'd love to hear your feedback on since we're having this conversation.
Yeah, for sure. So, first of all, again, I don't presume to have all the answers on this. And what I recommend is mostly based on what conversations I've had over the last year and a half with various folks, whether they're publishers, SEO specialists, AI builders, and folks that have deployed chatbots on their own sites. And I would say before you even adapt your content strategy, as a first step, I would say offering some kind of AI experience to your loyal readers and audience. So people who are already on your platform or your website. If you have a chat bot, even a rudimentary one, but just one that can really give you the data, right? Like what are the queries people are putting in this? How is it different from search? And what are sort of the patterns you can discern from that? Because generally, like to sort of project out from that, and again, I recognize that someone who's already on your platform is sort of already self-selected, and it may not be reflective of an audience at large, but it's going to give you some breadcrumbs to, oh, how to uh, understand how people are querying these bots generally. And then if you sort of optimize around those those patterns to the best of your ability, um, that should give you some uh, leg up in terms of like standing out in Perplexity or ChatGPT search or what have you. Again, it's a little bit apples oranges, um, but that is sort of like the first step. Now, again, on top of that, I put in like just kind of like my observations in terms of what I've seen stand out in various searches. And these searches can be tweaked, right? Like there's a lot of filters on Perplexity. So if you have academic papers, for example, there's certain platforms it favors and certain openness to the content that it clearly wants to lean towards. But like I say, my biggest takeaway from all of that, and to boil it down to one thing, is just something definitive, which tends to be something fairly comprehensive and has some unique value, has some unique information or insight or scoop of insight within that content. Again, with news and breaking news, it gets a little different. Honestly, chatbots are still not very good with breaking news. I don't know if, maybe that will start to change this year, just because there's usually that fog of war in a breaking news story. There's conflicting reports that really only journalists can sort out. And I've certainly see with Google and others that they tend to sort of steer clear of it. They'll sort of go like, oh, okay, like, for the most up-to-date things, just go check this or that out. I'll be interested to see what happens with Grok, because again, not that there's no misinformation on X, but it is more of a real-time place for information. So in other words, like the will the chatbot that gets, stabilizes the news story the fastest get some kind of advantage? Maybe. It's really early days though, and I think Twitter/X might give Grok that advantage.
Well,
So
yeah, Adam.
yeah,
Uh,
I just wanted to circle back, Pete. You had a good phrase about sort of finding some other experience a little earlier on, and I think this is maybe tangentially what you're referring to. But when ChatGPT first came out, everyone was super jazzed about it. But I think a lot of people observing the industry said, you know what, Google has the UX driver's seat here, and even with some of this accelerating market share erosion, um, I guess I'm curious, is there a, if Google ends up kind of, I mean, maybe it loses some market share here, but if it ends up sort of retaining some of its dominance, is it because like does UX really win the day? Like people can tweak their content all they want, but if you've got somebody already, if you have that user experience, is that really what's going to matter? These LLMs are, I think, going to change the user experience, but I mean, it's ridiculous. It would be, I'd be hard pressed to imagine a world where Google doesn't adapt and have so much erosion just because these LLMs are better. I don't know, maybe OpenAI moves faster. I don't even know if I'm asking a clear question of you, but like who's
Yeah,
going to
no,
win
I get
and
it.
why is probably what it boils down to.
Yeah, I totally hear that. And I tend to agree that Google's holding so many of the cards here. It's very hard to see them not adapting to at least a way that keeps their business dominant. Um, so like I said earlier, they need to move slower because of their traditional model. Also because they are so dominant, they're a target. And, we've seen some hints of that with regard to News Corp and how they've needed to come to the bargaining table with them, at least in various jurisdictions. Um, and also like with the Canadian government. So Google isn't so big that they can ignore concerns of publishers and stuff. But I will agree, their user experience has kind of a trump card, and that's speed because they've indexed the whole web. They've had decades of
Yeah.
experience now optimizing Chrome and doing a lot of technology around that. I'll confess, I've tried to switch my search engine to one of these AI engines, and two things keep me from doing it, my default. Um, and the one is speed. Like Chrome is just so fast. You just type anything in and boom, and you get these results.
Yeah.
And the
Type
other is
ahead
more,
and yeah.
yeah, exactly. And the other is a might be a little more fundamental, and it really depends on who you are and how you use the internet. Like I'm a journalist. I think I would consider myself a power user of the internet. And so it just so happens like a lot of searches I do, I want that page of links. Like I'm actually looking to sort of do my own analysis on that SERP page, right? Like this is more of a power user thing. I don't know if my wife quite uses
Yeah.
the internet this way, but because we're so used to doing that thing, we have that simpatico thing with Google. It's like do a quick search, bam, what's Disney? What Disney doing? And you just see a bunch of links. Oh, this is the one I want. And I can do that faster than ChatGPT and Perplexity right now, for probably 90% of searches. So how
Yeah.
much that translates to the regular folks, I don't know. But yeah, like you say, I
Well, no, but
don't. Yeah, go ahead.
sorry, go. No, I was just going to say, I wanted to reinforce something there. This is a very human thing, right? You can know exactly what you're searching for and find a book on Amazon, but actually, if you go to a section of a bookstore about that particular topic and you just kind of have this ambient awareness of all the various ebbs and flows of the, subtopics, I don't know. I think cognitively that's a very real experience. The fact that you're an educated journalist and you know about the topic areas, it's it's an example of it, but you could just have a lay interest in a
Yeah.
topic area. Search alone doesn't get you there. And I mean, I guess ultimately good AIs will give you overviews if you do the right kind of prompt
Yeah, totally.
engineering.
One last thing on UX before I see Lisa's hand up, so we'll
Yeah.
jump to her next. But
Yeah.
I
Please.
do think the potential for conversational AI is massive. Like, I do think that's going to become very much a thing that people start doing, which they didn't do to the extent people wanted them to with in the previous version of assistants like Siri, like Alexa, like all those things. Those were great technology, bad AI. Now the AI is caught up. And really now we just need to see sort of the marriage with these bigger platforms. Like Amazon was so clearly caught flat-footed, and they've been working hard to fix Alexa and make it AI, and they still haven't done it because it's obviously a hard problem. But once they do, and once they can get past this safety nervousness that every big platform has, like Apple's already getting pilloried for certain screenshots with Apple Intelligence, but once they get over that hump, I think people are just going to be talking. Like I talk to ChatGPT all the time now with advanced voice mode. Again, I'm a power user, but the convenience of that is so accessible that I think once this is built into the speakers we put all over our houses and our phones, and it's reliable and it's one button or even just a voice word, look out. Like that's going to be, especially a lot of searches are now going to be just like, how do I boil beans, ChatGPT? It's like, okay, I'll just tell you. Anyway, sorry, Lisa, go ahead.
Hi, sorry about that. My audio was off. First of all, thank you. This has been very interesting. I am calling in from LA, and one of the behaviors or one of the adaptations to what's been going on here has that people have found a lot of apps where they're getting, breaking information about the fires and the threats in their neighborhoods. And none of that information is available through Perplexity or ChatGPT or anything like that. It's not exactly crowdsourced information. There are apps that are pulling breaking news off of the first responders' wires, so we can see if there's a fire that broke out, in your neighborhood. It's really like the most current local information. And I am wondering if you think that AI will eventually um, start to cover information sources like that, as well as like, credentialed journalism sources, right? The journalists aren't getting this information as fast as some of these wire services, which are available through apps.
For sure. I think some of that, the answer is yes. AI will definitely um, take that and amplify it in a way that hasn't been possible before. So it's really just a matter of building all those bridges. Like currently, I think what we'll probably see is for the more innovative and forward-thinking newsrooms and media companies will be sort of the first ones in this game, and some people are already doing it. So some of these some newsrooms I've talked to, they've developed essentially their own AIs to read that kind of uh, real-time content so that their reporters get it faster. Now they still have the filter of the reporter and like let's make sure we're telling stories accurately with the content our audiences really want. Um, but the more they do that, the more they're going to realize more parts of that process can be automated. And the better AIs get and hallucinate less. And that seems to be the case with reasoning models, which are fairly almost brand new now, but that seems to be the way that the industry is going to go. Um, More places will get comfortable taking the checks out of various parts of that process to a point where they're confident that it's all together like, oh, you know what? This is actually, at this point more reliable than even when humans were doing it. Let's just let the bots do it, right? And I think we're going to see that more and more. Certainly, we've seen that process already with old generation AI. So before generative AI, news companies were certainly doing a lot with AI, but just the big ones. You'd get Reuters and AP and Bloomberg spending tons of money, building whole data lakes and whatever, and then just like doing AI with earnings reports and sports scores or what have you. And because that was very templated stuff, and you could apply some interesting stuff with language and start doing stuff at scale. But the only way to do it at scale is to remove humans from the process. So so what generative does, of course, is sort of democratize that and also bring the opportunity to bring that level of automation to content that perhaps isn't as templated. It can find the structure and the unstructured data. So it's just a matter of figuring out the bridges there, right? Because the information's out there. And now it's like, okay, who's going to build the AIs to take it and get it into these first again news organizations, and then anyone who has a deal with Perplexity or ChatGPT, that'll be available
Yeah,
to
that
the
makes
broad
sense.
AI engines.
Do you think that the journalist of the immediate future will be a combination of somebody with critical judgment skills, critical thinking, and also AI engineering skills to be
Certainly
able to
prompt engineering skills. Like I think there's more like just AI skills, and it's less about the engineering, right? It's more about like the mindset. It's just kind of playing with it for a while. Because like when I first started my business and started doing this, like, I had a lot of imposter syndrome too, because I'm not an engineer. Like I don't code. Um, and the more I've used AI over the past year and a half, the more I realize the just using the tools day in and day out, you learn so much about, oh, this is how, like, you kind of almost need to do it for a while to sort of wrap your brain about how to do this stuff. And I've built my own tools, and there's a great platform I use called Mind Studio, which is a no code platform. They don't pay me, by the way. Uh, and but it's really cool because it's like if you have a little bit of that, not coding ability, but like a mindset to sort of be a little left-brained and arrange things in a sort of array and build bridges between functions and automations. So the key thing is like what Mind Studio and other things like it do. It's like, oh, the AI, the generative part of it is just one part of a sequence of things you're putting together. And then once you put that together, you can do things like automatically tweet when this happens or that happens, or automatically write a story in this way and write, do a few different workflows so it comes out. So I think that's going to get more common. So AI skills definitely, but to the extent there's engineering, it'd be just probably be prompt engineering. And then, like I say, like there are things that AIs can't do and probably won't do for a long time. Like you can't earn the trust of a source with AI. That's impossible. Like so, real journalism is going to continue. Sadly, because of the struggles of the industry and sort of the adjustments to this new way of doing things in terms of the media business, there's probably going to be fewer of them for a while.
Makes
And yeah,
sense.
I want to hear more your
Thank you.
take on that, but I definitely want to hear Paul's question or comment. So,
Thanks, Pete. This is great. In terms of UGC, what's your take on that? I mean, Sundar Pichai has said we're losing search traffic to TikTok, and whether it goes away or not, there are going to be other apps that replace it. AI Overview on Google uses a lot of Reddit content, and debatably whether it works. Glue on pizza, all those issues, but clearly there's a lot of use for UGC and crowdsourced content. How do you see that playing in as these engines continue to roll out?
Yeah, really good question. So, it's an interesting note about the glue on pizza thing, though, which does related to user generated content because that was a joke from Reddit that got mixed into results. Um, it hasn't happened since. Isn't that interesting? We haven't had really like complaints about AI overviews getting things wrong since that first rollout, at least not at a scale that I've seen. So that strongly suggests to me that's a fixable problem. That the idea that there's this user generated content, but it needs to go through a filter of, almost intent that some other content doesn't. Like, in other words, the things you might not have even thought about playing the SEO game. If you are like, in other words, if you're playing the SEO game, um, you already assumed you're self-selected for good information. That you're not trying to throw satire out there or tell jokes or bedtime stories, right? And no one ever thought about that, but now you have to think about that when you factor in an AI looking at a bigger corpus of stuff. And it's like, oh, some of this content's jokes, some of it's satire, some of it's just abhorrent. So there's a filter layer on this that I think the AI companies are aware of. certainly trying to figure out. But I think uh, so right away there's that filtering. But then even within the UGC, is there stuff that is good information that may even be not necessarily like traditional like SEO content or audience cultivating content in the traditional way. Um, yeah, I think that's a it's almost like I think if you run an AI company like Google, you kind of need a network like YouTube or something like that to make sure you have a good data set that sort of can show you what that is. And if not, there's probably ways to buy that data sort of so you could get essentially architect your AIs better for UGC. Interesting. That actually gives me some thoughts on who might buy TikTok. But anyway, we can get into that if you want. Um, yeah. Who's
All
next? Karan.
right. Karen.
Hi, Pete. Great stuff. So my question is, what do you think about a Web 3.0 human curated model, like you said? So Pete has 15,000 subscribers. He's got all this content that he's generated, and people can go there, use AI to ask any question and find answers, and actually links to the source of the information, where that content comes from. Uh, basically having a Web 3.0 model where it's not always about the giants, but trusted sources of information.
Yeah, I like Web 3.0. I worked at CoinDesk for a while. I certainly appreciate what it can do. Um, is AI potentially a killer app for it? I don't know. I know some people working in decentralized AI, and I know that's not quite what you're talking about. It's like with Web3 and this verification process. I think I think it's fine. Like again, there's a lot of great applications of verification and identity that are solved by Web3. I think it's just there's that area has always struggled from an understandability problem and a scaling problem, and some of those are solvable with the right tech. But I think the understanding problem has always been a bit of an issue. But I'm a big believer in it. Like I really like the application of Web3 to well, it's almost exactly what you talked about, but slightly different, which is the content provenance. So, there's some great protocols out there and standards that are out that bring blockchain into the way to establish, like, photos are what they say they are, and there's a chain of history that cannot be altered with that photo and whatever AI generated it, and then how it was altered after. So I think it has a place. I don't know if the sort of traditional problems that keep Web3 from scaling and capturing the world are necessarily solved by AI, unless there's something really intractable that only the blockchain can fix.
Uh, Amazing. Well, this has been a lot of fun, really eye-opening. Pete, thanks so much for sharing your thoughts here. Make sure to share this with the rest of the
Cool.
community as well. And yeah, great to have you as part of this. Thanks everyone for some terrific comments and questions. Always fun. We got a lot of exciting guest speakers coming up next couple months. So look forward to seeing you all a lot more. And yeah, definitely follow the Media Copilot. Subscribe if you haven't already. The link's been in the chat. I'll pop it in the community as well. And yeah, Pete, I'll keep reading to try to make sense of this whole crazy space.
Awesome. Thanks, y'all. I hope you saw the last slide. Just go ahead. You got my email. You got my newsletter. Everyone on this call, if you subscribe, I'll get the 6 months of the paid subscription free. So please do.
Excellent. Well, thanks everyone. Have a great rest of your week.
Thank you.